This is George Dionne with Metal Express Radio, and I'm here with Mark Mangold of American Tears. How you doing, Mark?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good, excellent. You got the new album out, Free Angel Express, on Deco Music. You define that as keyboard rock. How so?
Well, there's no guitars, so I mean, when you say keyboards, that could mean 30 instruments. I mean, you can play string sections and choirs and of course, organ and mellotron and synths and all the classic vintage keyboards that we used to use, a long time ago. And you can also get elephant sounds, as we did on one of the songs called Tusk, which is kind of a tribute to all these people who are unnecessarily killing these beautiful, huge beasts. There's a lot you can do with keyboards these days. It can get very confusing.
So the first song that you released from the album was Sledgehammered. What's that song about?
Sledgehammered is kind of a guitar riff played on a grindy Hammond organ with a lot of synths added. I love playing guitar licks on keyboards, being a keyboard player. So, Sledgehammered is about getting surprised by something, whether it's a relationship or just something that shocks you.
Yeah.
I came up with the riff, and I just thought we needed something powerful and aggressive as the title, and Sledgehammered seemed to work pretty well. So,
you've been doing the rounds in the heavy metal websites and stuff like that, I've noticed. So, people think American Tears, not very heavy metal, but you're very tied to metal. I mean, you even have Barry Sparks on the track for Sledgehammer.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're metal. I mean, what is metal anyway? I mean, right. Some of the stuff, I guess, if you had guitars, you could maybe, call it metal. But it's played on keyboards, so I think those. I hate these labels anyway.
Right.
What is prog? I don't think it's prog. Maybe it's hard rock, but I think it is kind of what it is, and people just need to listen to it. We're certainly not, striving to be in any particular category. It's just, it's not normal music. It's not going by the rules. It's not going by formula, which is something that, I've written a lot of pop through the years and been in a number of bands, but American Tears has always been about stretching it out and being creative and not being tied down to the safety net of verse, chorus, bridge, fade, as we're so often used to hearing. So when you get to a certain section, you want to create a moment that excites you and hopefully excites the audience. So it might be piling up a string and a choir and a mellotron and a synth line and a whole tapestry of sounds that kind of creates a new animal. And I forgot Hammond organ, one of my favorite things. But you're trying to create these new sounds that these lush kind of blends that maybe make your skin tingle. I mean, that's my goal. So and then you can also just have a grindy ass Hammond sound, as Sledgehammer was, with a riff, kind of John Lordy, I guess.
Yeah.
Everybody now grindy organ to John Lord, but in the 70s, we did our first 3 records in the 70s. I mean, there was Vanilla Fudge, and there were the Rascals, and there were the Vagrants, and there was early Deep Purple. I mean, just kicking the volume up on Hammond organ is something that organ players love to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So your second single is Woke. What's that song? What's the meaning behind that song?
Are you woke? Meaning, are you aware? Are you of what's going on? And I think that's really about the times we're experiencing right now. And maybe asking the question, not necessarily preaching or shoving anything down anybody's throat, but it's just kind of a request in a way to be aware of what's going on around you.
Do you feel that when you started as a musician in the 70s that we're kind of still facing the issues that you were facing back then?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing about American Tears is not only did I want to revisit a synth solo or the freedom of writing those songs as American Tears did then, but, you know, first few records, it was kind of Vietnam War. It was Nixon. It was a lot of anti-authority going on. There were kids, friends getting drafted, forced to go to Vietnam for what turned out to be bullshit.
Right.
And a great loss of life and money. And veterans are still paying the price for it now. And veterans, you know, we don't have to get too political, but I just think veterans are treated like shit. They're used up and they're exploited and they're taken advantage of and they're fooled. And then they're sent home to just deal with it. And that was going on then. And unbelievably, it's still going on now, all these years later. How is that even possible? We just. So, all in all, I just was in American Tears state of mind.
Right.
And some of the songs are protest songs. There's something behind a lot of them. There's some anger and aggression behind some of them, which for me is a great release. But also, I think, a very peaceful and benevolent way to release your anger or to express yourself or to protest. I mean, it's like taking a knee. I'm not hurting anybody. So for me, it's a good way to do it, and hopefully, you know, as in the 60s and 70s, music was a lot about change. Music was a force of change. The bands were trying to change people's minds, whether it's the Beatles or the Who or Won't Get Fooled Again. I mean, you know, the examples are countless. So that's one of the things behind American Tears as well, is getting back to that mentality of trying to maybe change your mind and the rest will follow.
Exactly.
You know,
on your last album, Hardcore, you used instruments that were only available in the 70s. Did you do something similar with the new album?
Yeah, you know, in between Hardcore and Free Angel Express, we also had an album last year called White Flags. And yeah, it's basically a lot of those vintage sounds with which now you have great access to, you know, in computers. So you really they sound better actually and much easier to record. So it's the same kind of mindset.
Yep.
So I do have access to a lot more stuff, which I'm also using. But in a way, it's, you know, Hans Zimmer and all these movies are huge. You know, these huge movie soundtracks. In those days, the records were kind of smaller. Now, records are bigger and there's more bottom and more high end and they're thicker and they're louder. And maybe dance music helped to make that happen as well because it's slamming. So I kind of took that approach and kind of modernized or tried to modernize that old genre to bring it up so that the bottom, like there's a song on White Flags called Fire Down Below. And I just wanted the most bottom ever heard on a record ever. So it kind of shakes the floor. So we're just really pushing the parameters of sound. And if you listen to it on good speakers as opposed to little iPhones or computers or headphones, it really, the spectrum is pretty big on these records. It's kind of a body massage. So I do encourage people to listen to it on some decent speakers or even in a car. In a car, it should give you a nice shake.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of music. I've noticed, just listening through a phone, it's a little more tinny or stuff like that. When you put on like really good headphones or you have really good speakers, it's a completely different experience. You could go from
Well,
not liking something to liking it.
well, it's hitting you in the ears.
Yeah,
It's hitting your intellect. You and with your body. It's meant to hit your regions, and the bass is supposed to hit you in your solar plexus. I mean, it's a feeling thing. So if you're just listening to things through your tiny little headphones that are, again, it's your intellect in a way. You're not really getting the physical experience of, which is great about. That's why we go to concerts. I mean,
right.
that's why we want to be at a live gig, which unfortunately are not happening these days. So
Well, let's go back a little bit. What do you remember about making the first American Tears album?
in the 70s, you mean?
Yes.
In this, uh, it kind of feels like it does now. It's a lot of fun. It's challenging. In those were the days when all the great bands that we love now were created, because people were trying to create their own sound. You have Yes and Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and, again, Vanilla Fudge and Gentle Giant. I mean, Jethro Tull, Frank Zappa. I mean, everyone was trying to carve out their niche, as opposed to now where it's everybody is trying to sound the same, maybe because of corporate, restrictions. They want, if they can get one song and one singer to release records, they would fucking do it.
That's true.
There's no risk. But when you're putting out something as different as a Jethro Tull or an American Tears or a Yes, they're taking chances because those bands sound like nobody else. So they used to throw it out there. Many, many more record companies than there are now. They used to put it out, and they would see if it stuck to the wall. And then you could break out of St. Louis, and then you go to St. Louis and you do a gig, and then somebody from Chicago would hear, oh, there's this band, and they number one in St. Louis, and it would kind of spread by territories. Now, radio is owned by two or three big companies. So you have one program director somewhere who's programming the entire United States, for instance. Right. So it's a lot harder to break out, which is why it's great to be talking to people like yourself who are kind of the equivalent of what it was back then to break out of St. Louis, some radio station in St. Louis, where the DJ wasn't listening to anybody and he had the balls to play your record because he loved it, and right. People called in and responded to it. So, and that's kind of how these great bands were born. So that's kind of the thinking of American Tears is we're just doing what we're doing. And by the way, we, meaning for this record, is Alex Landenberg, an amazing drummer from Camelot, and Barry Sparks, who's phenomenal bass player, Michael Schenker, Yngwie, and Dokken. And so it's wonderful to be collaborating with these guys. But you don't know what's going to happen when you're writing a 10-minute song. And on an instrument that, I get asked by people, how do you get that guitar sound? I said, that's a synthesizer, or that's an organ. That's not a guitar. So, people aren't aware of some of these things as they used to be, maybe, especially the younger generation. So which is fun. I mean, they haven't maybe heard a synth solo before. So it's kind of breaking new ground. So it's a lot of fun.
So when American Tears broke up in the later 70s, it didn't really break up. It morphed into the band Touch.
Yeah.
How did it make that metamorphosis?
Okay. First band, American Tears trio, we played a lot. And then we had another album as a trio. And sadly, our bass player passed away. at that time. And I kind of got tired of, I was the only singer in the band, surrounded by keyboards, and I really wanted to be a little, I just wanted the pendulum to swing. So Touch, Craig Brooks joined the band, and we got our bass player, Doug Howard. And it was now 40-part harmonies and guitars and orchestrations, and it wasn't me alone anymore. And it was just the kind of the opposite. And we moved labels. We changed over to a label called Atco Atlantic, and we did this record that still seems to be popular all these years later. By the way, we just did another Touch record, which we're actually in the process of mixing. Yeah, so it's very exciting. Same guys, singing and playing better than ever. So that's been exciting. But yeah, we it was lonely being in America just because Tommy and Greg, and they didn't sing, they played, and they were great performers. But it was nice to get some help, and it was refreshing. But it's also nice to get back to it now and revisit that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big fan of that style of music anyway. The sort of, I guess overproduced, keyboard heavy, multi-part harmony sound of the 80s. I love that stuff. And, there's a lot of bands in Europe doing it again, but not much over here in the United States.
I don't know of any other bands right now that don't have a guitar, that are just keyboard based, like ELP was. I'd be refreshed if there was. It is kind of unique for us, but I don't play guitar, so though they do have some amazing plugins that they're inventing now, where a keyboard player can sound exactly like a guitar. And we're going to get into that on the next record in a big way. I mean, you could sound like Eddie Van Halen if you want.
Sure.
It's really, really amazing what you can do now.
So one thing I found interesting about Touch is that you guys played the first Monsters of Rock festival in 1980. It was you, Rainbow, Judas Priest, Scorpions, April Wine, Saxon. How'd you get on that bill?
Well, we were touring with Rainbow.
Okay.
Yeah, we were managed by Bruce Payne. Hey, Bruce, who also managed Rainbow. And Bruce is the guy who helped us morph out of American Tears into Touch. And he got us on that bill, and thank goodness he did. All these years later, we found out we were, the first band to play at Donington, which, being the first Donington, we didn't know was going to turn into what it turned into. And, there were 60,000 people there. For us, it was an amazing experience. We worked hard to get there, rehearsing in a loft in New York for a couple of years and perfecting these songs. And we were tight as hell. So we're not really nervous about what we were doing. We were kind of a little nervous about how it was going to sound, how the sound guy was going to do us, and if it would translate to the crowd. But it was a great experience. And meeting those guys, Scorpions and Judas Priest, and, hanging with that was very surreal, very wonderful.
Excellent.
Yeah, man.
After Touch broke up, you worked on probably two of my favorite albums, and that was the first Michael Bolton album and the second Michael Bolton album, Everybody's Crazy.
Your stuff, man. Wow.
I don't even think that a lot of people know that those two albums exist, because it's like Bolton doesn't really put them on his greatest hits or anything like that. But how did that opportunity come about for you?
Well, in those days, New York was very vibrant. I don't know if it even exists now, but there were there was a club in New York called the China Club and another one called Nirvana, and everybody would hang at the China Club. Or Thursday nights at Nirvana, you could go and you'd see David Bowie or Mick Jagger, the Stones, or I mean anybody. I bumped into Michael one night. Was getting to be successful, and Michael was just about getting his deal. I was a friend of his manager, Louis, and Louis kind of put us together to write a song, and we wrote Fool's Game. Also met, I mean, who else was hanging out? Danger, Danger, Diving for Pearls. I met Aldo Nova there, and we wrote a bunch of stuff with Aldo. I mean, that was like the scene in New York. So you could go, and your life could be changed in an evening. If you met somebody, you could be working for years after a visit to the China Club. It's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah,
probably nothing like that around today, right?
Not that I know of. I'm in Sweden right now, and have been for a couple of months. Do all this border stuff going on in the States, but there was kind of a scene like that here in Sweden. Stockholm especially is a huge music town. A lot of music of the world is Swedes. I don't know if people know that. The people behind Lady Gaga and Katy Perry, and it's all Swedish guys and Norwegian guys, or a lot of it is anyway. So there's a huge scene over here, but of course now with the virus, it's all kind of locked down. But that New York scene was magical. It was just a wonderful time to be coming up.
You also were on a project that I didn't realize you were on. It's one of my favorite albums or projects that you worked on. Drive, She Said.
Drive, She Said.
I kind of discovered that by accident. How'd you get involved in that one?
Well, Touch was kind of fizzling. I mean, we had lost our deal. And I had worked with Michael, but I really wanted to be in a band. I went on tour with Michael a bit. And I found Al Fritsch, who was my partner in Drive, She Said, we did 6 albums. And Al had that phenomenal voice and played every instrument. And we figured rather than dealing with pain in the ass musicians who are going to come and go, we kind of made it a duo-ish thing.
Yeah.
We had the same guys in the band, but we just wanted the best players available at the time, which we got. And then by some stroke of luck, we got signed to Columbia and did that record. And then grunge hit. The old famous grunge, and then we moved over to Europe more because the States, the record companies were really moving over to bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and that. So we really focused on Europe and toured every nook and cranny of the UK, that island, and we toured Europe, and we opened up for UFO and a lot of wonderful gigs at sleazy little clubs. And yeah, it ended up, we ended up doing 6 records.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, while you were over in Europe, is that how you got involved with The Sign, which was a band with Randy Jackson of Zebra, Terry Brock, one of my favorites, Billy Greer from Kansas, Bobby Rondinelli of Rainbow?
Yeah. With The Sign, I got a call. There's a guy named Serafino who has a record label called Frontiers. And Serafino called me up and, Mark, I want to start a super group. Yeah, we put that together. And, I grew up with Randy. I know Randy for years. We both grew up on Long Island. There was a club called the Action House on Long Island, which was kind of a center of music where Vanilla Fudge came up, the Rascals, the Illusion. I don't know if you know these bands, the Vagrants. I know, of course, you know Vanilla Fudge.
Yes.
This is where they would play. And I was in a band at the time called The Gathering Storm. Randy was in Zebra. So I knew Randy for a long. Billy Joel played there. I knew Randy for a long time. So anyway, Serafino put us together, and Terry and Randy came over to my house in New York City for a day, and we wrote like 10 songs in one day or something like that. We just exploded. It was like because again, we were frustrated too by not being able to play and scathe, I should say, not play, because in a way it was getting generic and getting formula, and we wanted long, aggressive songs that we could kick ass and show off. And Terry and Randy are phenomenal singers, and the harmonies that they came up with were amazing. And of course, Randy is just amazing. They're all amazing musicians. And then it took us about 10 months to record it, because it takes a lot longer to record it than to write it. If you could write it as fast as you could record it, you'd just be spitting stuff out. But that process of, getting the drum sound and filling in all the holes was time consuming. It might have taken maybe almost a year or something. Because we didn't have a big studio, we were sending files back and forth. Billy was wherever he was, sending his bass parts in on the internet. So, yeah. But we finally got it done, and it was just remixed and remastered, because we never really liked the original version, the way it was kind of put together and mastered. So a year and a half ago, it's come out on Escape Records, and it sounds night and day. Yeah. Much, much, much better than the original. It's the way I always wanted it to sound. So I'm very happy we got that done, and it's available. It's a digipack, so there's both CDs.
Good.
Yeah, both of them in one package. So.
Oh, good. I'm gonna have to look for that. I had it at one time, and I don't know why I got rid of it. I remember the early days of Frontiers, and the sign was definitely part of them. And at the time, I had no idea who was involved, and I'm like, okay.
The second record was such a disappointment. I mean, like, they mixed it, and I mean, they left out guitar solos. There were parts that were missing. It was just it was a fiasco. So finally, we released our version, and it really sounds the way we want it to sound. So
excellent. So, are you still doing handstands on your keyboards?
I'm practicing.
You're practicing. You're working your way up to it.
If you fall over the other way, and I did a couple of times, you really get hurt. And at my age, I'll be at the chiropractor for like a month. So, but yeah.
So, do you have any other projects? Do you have any other projects going on besides the new American Tears album and the upcoming Touch album? Are you working on anything else?
Well, a funny thing happened about a month ago. I was in a band called Flesh and Blood with Al Petrelli from TSO and Danny Vaughan from Taiketo. And a label, Universal in France, discovered it and wants to re-release it. So Danny and I finished 2 bonus cuts over the last month. It's very bluesy. It's kind of like Black Crowes or something like that. It's very bluesy stuff. And that's coming out in January, so that's exciting. It was great to revisit that sleazy, bluesy stuff with slide guitars and Hammond organ. So that's coming out. And also a band that I'm working, very keyboard, it's actually called Keys. And it's the singer from a band called Syra. I don't know if you know Syra.
I may.
An amazing, one of the best singers out there, as far as I'm concerned. Alex Landenberg on drums, Charlie from Angel. It's 3 keyboard players. stacks of keyboards and an amazing singer. So it's kind of gothy kind of music played on keyboards. It's aggressive. So we're having a great time doing that and showing off and trying to get some cameo appearances by some famous keyboard players. We'll see what happens. I'd love to have, you know, Don Airy, who's a friend, or Rick Wakeman, or somebody just play a solo on this, please.
Right.
Because it's keyboards. You might hear some guitar, but that'll be generated with keyboards. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
Don't leave out Derek Sherinian. He's actually a pretty decent keyboardist.
Send me his email. Well, it's not about how even well they play. We need somebody famous.
He is. It was in Dream Theater.
I thought that was Joshua. Isn't that Joshua? What's it?
I'm not sure if Derek's still in Dream Theater, but he was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Rudolph. Whatever his name is the guy in Dream Theater.
He's also in Sons of Apollo.
Give me his email. Yeah, it's kind of a convergence of. I'm trying to make it a convergence of some great keyboard players because it's all scathing shit. Yeah, it's a lot of great.
That's all I got for you today, Mark.
Okay, man.
Metal Express.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this, and I really appreciate it.
No problem. Take care.
Okay, take care. Bye.